Welcome to the Nordic Venture Show, your speed date with the coolest ventures, brightest founders, and exciting things happening in the Nordics. In this episode, our venture date is with VTT, Visionary Research and Innovation Partner for Companies and Society, and one of Europe's leading research institutions.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really fascinating.
Yeah, what's that?
How cutting-edge science and tech can be more than just ideas, how they actually drive change, real economic growth.
Ah, right, that transition from lab to market.
Exactly. We're diving into how one specific research and innovation partner based over in Finland does this. They've really built a name for taking deep tech breakthroughs and turning them into successful companies, impactful solutions.
And they're not small scale either. I mean, we're talking significant operations here. Hundreds of millions in operating income, over 2,000 employees, a huge patent portfolio, something like 450 families.
Wow.
And they work with over 1,000 customers around the world. Their whole mission is clear: drive renewal in society, in industry.
And they do that by accelerating technology transfer.
Right.
Getting the tech out there.
Precisely.
So that's what we want to unpack today. How do they actually bridge that gap, from complex science to real impact, especially how they launch new ventures? We'll look at some very recent examples too.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. They have a few main ways they get tech out of the lab.
Like what?
Well, there's contract research working directly with established companies on specific challenges. Pretty standard stuff for an R&D org.
Okay.
And they also license their IP, their intellectual property. So, patents for their inventions. Other companies can then build on those discoveries.
Right, licensing. But I think the really interesting path, the one with maybe the most potential for, radical change.
Yeah.
That's the spin-offs, isn't it? The new companies they create.
Exactly. And they have a dedicated engine for that, which they call VTT LaunchPad.
VTT LaunchPad, okay.
Yeah, it's specifically set up to take promising internal technologies and really develop them into fundable startup ventures.
Fund being the key word there.
Absolutely. And crucially, they're not just aiming for any company. The goal is ventures that can achieve significant global impact right from the beginning.
So building global players from day one, that's ambitious. How do they decide which tech gets this treatment? How do they guide it?
Well, they follow these 5 principles, as they call them. It's their framework for creating these deep tech spin-offs.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
Principle 1 is all about strategic assessment. Basically asking, how can this specific technology create the most powerful impact?
So choosing the right path. Spin-off versus licensing or something else.
Exactly. Which route maximizes the impact? And if a spin-off is the best route, then the core technology itself gets invested into the new company. It's an in-kind contribution.
Got it. What's principle 2?
Principle 2 really doubles down on that ambition. Steer for global impact.
Ah, back to the global focus.
Yes. Any project they incubate has to have that global vision. They push the teams to think big, like, what's the huge impact 10 years from now?
Okay.
But also, crucially, what are the concrete steps needed in the next 3 years to actually get there? Big vision, practical plan.
That makes sense. Big goals need concrete steps. What's next? Principle 3.
Principle 3, avoid waste.
Huh. Easier said than done in a startup, I imagine.
Totally. But time is just so critical, right? Especially in deep tech where things can take longer. So they are ruthless about focusing teams only on what is most important right now.
How do they enforce that?
By rigorously mapping out all the assumptions in the business plan about the market, the tech, the customers, everything, and then actively testing those assumptions.
So getting real-world feedback quickly.
Exactly. And if the evidence contradicts an assumption, you act immediately. Pivot, refine, don't waste time on something that isn't working.
Smart. Okay, principle 4.
Principle 4 is about the process itself. Create and communicate with clarity.
So avoiding waste in the program too.
Precisely. Clear guidelines, simple application process, really well-defined objectives for incubation. Everyone knows what success looks like.
And what kind of support does LaunchPad offer?
It's pretty substantial. Funding, up to €1 million, but specifically for things like customer engagement, business development activities.
So market-focused funding.
Yes. Plus coaching, active support on developing the IPR strategy and building the team. But there are criteria.
What do they look for in an idea?
It needs demonstrated technology, obviously, but also clear market potential, scalability. Remember that global focus is a positive societal impact, and importantly, a team that's actually developable, coachable.
Right. The team is always key. Okay, the final one, Principle 5.
Principle 5 gets into the business terms.
Yeah.
It's about technology transfer terms that, again, enable that global impact, but also respect the fact that public money often supports the initial research. So taxpayers' best interests.
How does that work in practice? What are the terms like?
They invest the core intellectual property, the IPR, in exchange for preferred shares in the spinoff company.
Okay, so they take an equity stake.
Yeah, typically it works out to around 10% ownership for them after the first external investment round comes in.
And what about things like royalties?
That's the interesting part. Typically no royalty or annual fees. The main driver is the potential for impact, the company's ability to succeed globally.
So their success is tied directly to the spin-off's success and impact, not just licensing fees.
Exactly. It signals they're really invested in the long-term vision.
You can really see how the structured, principled approach is working when you look at the investment results, can't you? Especially recently.
Absolutely. I mean, the program's been running 5 years, incubating projects, but the momentum, particularly in funding, seems to be really picking up.
Yeah, I saw some numbers. Looking at Finland's startup scene, which is already strong, the impact is pretty striking. In 2024 alone, something like 14%.
14%, yes. 14% of all the equity capital raised by Finnish startups in 2024 went to spin-offs from this one organization.
That's huge. That's a massive slice of the pie.
It really is. It shows huge investor confidence, right, in the quality, the potential of these deep tech companies. That 14% translates to 206 million euros raised by 17 different companies just in 2024.
Wow. And that's built on previous years, too.
Definitely. The momentum's been building. Over the last 5 years, looking at 2020 to 2024, their spin-offs consistently grab a big share. The average is nearly 10%, 9.85% to be exact.
And the total amount raised over that period?
It's over 660 million euros. 662.11 million raised by 29 different spin-offs.
So this isn't just theoretical, it's attracting serious capital. Let's make it more concrete. Can we talk about some of the specific companies funded recently, like in the last year or two?
Yeah, definitely. You look at 2023, 2024. You see companies like Carbonate. They're working on concrete that actually has a negative CO2 footprint.
CO2 negative concrete. That would be a game changer for construction.
Absolutely massive potential. Then there's Semicon. They're developing new semiconductor qubit technology.
Qubits, so quantum computing.
Foundational tech for quantum computers, yeah. Trying to make them more scalable.
Okay.
Steady Energy. They're developing small, low-temperature reactors specifically for district heating.
So tackling sustainable energy at a local level. Interesting.
Then you've got Flow Computing. Their focus is next-generation super CPUs, pushing processing power way beyond current standards.
Super CPUs, what does that enable?
Think complex simulations, AI model training, scientific computing, things that need massive number crunching.
Right, more power.
Then Arctic Instruments. They make critical components for quantum computers specifically, near quantum-limited amplifiers for reading the state of qubits. Highly technical, but essential.
Okay, another piece of the quantum puzzle.
And one more, Happy Plant Protein. They're working on transforming plant protein production, finding novel ways to create sustainable food sources.
Wow. So concrete, quantum, energy, computing, food. It's a really diverse range, but all tackling major global challenges.
Exactly. You see that direct link from deep science to solutions for big problems.
And it's not just about the spin-offs, is it? The underlying research engine is constantly producing new stuff. I saw a flurry of news just from, May 2025?
Yeah, that gives a good snapshot of the breadth. For instance, new environment perception sensors they developed with a partner. They can detect obstacles over 200 meters away.
Even in bad visibility.
Even in near zero visibility. That's a huge leap for transport safety cars, trucks, maybe even trains or ships.
Definitely. What else was recent?
They're very active in quantum security. A new research project was announced aiming to lead Finland towards a quantum-safe future.
So getting ahead of the curve on the security challenges quantum computing might create.
Exactly. Thinking ahead. Also, an EU consortium they're part of just opened up services for next-gen edge AI technologies.
Edge AI, meaning AI processing done locally on devices.
Right, having those advanced capabilities more accessible for companies to build into their own products and services.
Oh, okay.
There was also significant EU funding announced for advanced defense tech they're involved in. Things like innovations for minesweeping, next-gen helicopter design, even underwater communications.
So contributing to national and European security, too.
Seems so. And on the environmental side, they were discussing carbon capture and utilization CCU.
utilization. So not just capturing CO2, but turning it into something useful.
Exactly. Transforming emissions into valuable resources. A pathway towards a more circular economy for industry.
That sounds promising. Any other highlights from May?
Well, reflecting their deep digital expertise, there were discussions around quantum computer procurement in Finland and a policy brief they contributed to about Finland's role.
Ah, so shaping national strategy, too.
Seems like it. And kind of cool, their time laboratory, which uses an advanced optical clock, is literally helping to redefine the standard measurement of a second.
Redefining time itself. Okay, that's pretty fundamental science.
It shows the range, doesn't it? From very fundamental physics to very applied industrial solutions.
It really does. And you can see how all this activity fits into their core focus areas, right? Carbon neutral solutions.
Sustainable products and materials.
And digital technologies.
Yeah, those seem to be the big pillars where they're developing solutions.
Yeah.
And it all feeds back into that core mission.
Which is about using that science and tech innovation to help society and companies grow, right? And specifically turning those big global challenges like climate change or resource scarcity into opportunities for sustainable growth.
Exactly. It's science and innovation very purposefully directed towards impact.
So if we sum this all up, what we're seeing is an organization that's built a really effective system, a system for taking deep science and translating it into genuine real-world impact.
Yeah, through that principled approach, especially with the LaunchPad initiative for spinoffs, they're proving you can consistently create ventures that tackle critical challenges and attract serious investment.
And that ability, that consistency in turning complex research into fundable, impactful companies, especially ones geared for a global scale from the start, that really is impressive. It's about looking beyond the obvious result in the lab, isn't it?
Seeing the potential for renewal, for change.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think, though. Looking ahead, we've touched on so many different breakthrough areas today. CO2 negative concrete, new kinds of CPUs, quantum tech, advanced sensors, plant proteins. If you had to pick one area, maybe one we discussed, or even an underlying theme, which do you think might create the most surprisingly widespread global impact over, say, the next 10 or 15 years? And maybe why? What's the hidden potential there?
That's a great question to ponder. Which of these seeds being planted now will grow into the most unexpected forest?
Thanks for tuning in. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Music, or your favorite app, and connect with us on LinkedIn for more stories and insights.